Settling into the pace, Cervianus shifted his fur capole into a slightly more comfortable position and tried not to dwell on the enemy who could be waiting around any corner or lurking in any crevice they passed. Each man carried a much more specialized pack than the standard legionary marching kit. Gone were the sudis stakes, entrenching tools, cooking utensils, and spare clothing. Food would be eaten cold or cooked over a small fire if any wildlife should be unfortunate enough to cross their path. No bread would be baked on this journey. Instead, extra hard tack had been added, and the bulk of the weight carried by each man consisted of extra blankets against a sudden drop in temperature during the night, and the life-preserving stores of water, the most precious commodity they could attain now. Nausicaa had sensibly, if disobediently, waited for the tribune's column to leave, and then requisitioned 24 of the horses and camels that accompanied the baggage train that would wait at Buhen for their return. Despite Vitalis's orders that they travel without animals for speed and flexibility, Nausicaa and Draco had listened intently last night to Cervianus's list of dangers and needs, and had decided that the expedient acquisition of a few of the faster pack animals would be a sensible idea, even though half their load would be their own food. Cervianus had rolled his eyes at the idiocy of Ulysses finding places among his kit to secrete his decorative daggers they had removed from the stores in Nicopolis. So much had happened in the past few weeks that their very existence had gone clear from Cervianus's mind until he found his friend cramming them in along water packs and blankets. Still, should they actually, against all the odds, make it through this, it would be better that the incriminating evidence stay with them than be found among the kit by those who stayed at Buhen. How awful it would be to survive a march across the most forbidding place in the world, only to be beaten for theft upon their return. Cervianus glanced across at his friend and received a crazed grin in return. Ulysses never ceased to amaze him with his optimistic attitude in the face of horrible hardships. Turning back, he faced the direction of march and scanned the terrain. The track they followed was barely traceable in the grey-brown nightmare landscape. How the scouts could even identify that this was a trail at all amazed him. The column of men wound their way up the slope from their starting point by the river and into a strange world of humps of land, formed by dark grey or deep umber rocks, displaying jagged points or lines of strata as they rose from the grit. It looked to him as though this were an impromptu graveyard for giant petrified tortoises. The defiles and dips between them could contain anything. The sand was already in his boots and rubbing his raw feet. The days stretched on as the legion moved. By the time they stopped for the main break at around an hour before noon, the men were already heartily sick of the journey. Ulysses had calculated their pace and distance, and had announced with a jolly laugh that they had managed 15 miles in the morning, and that if Nausicaa could keep them to the same pace, they should manage 30 miles a day, a pace that could see them at Napata in the predicted 7 days, 8 at the most, putting them at their destination an estimated 5 days before the rest of the army. One look around at the men collapsed on their shields, rubbing their feet and wincing, made the likelihood of that actually occurring miserably apparent. The pace would slacken only a little this afternoon, but Cervianus could see ahead. Tomorrow morning the strain of what they had achieved today would begin to tell. After a night's rest, the muscles would seize, especially given the bone-chilling cold of a desert night. Blisters and grazes would come up and burst, leaving men's feet and shoulders raw and painful. No, tomorrow they would be lucky if the pace dropped by only a third. The noon break was well received by the men of the cohorts, even though it involved sitting in the lee of dusty rocks and trying to hide from the roasting sun, eating cold, hard biscuit with a mere dribble of water, rather than the meat bread and soured wine they would normally consume on campaign. And then, all too soon, the worst of the day's heat passed, and Nausicaa and Draco, with their optios, put out the calls, gathering the men ready for the march once again. The mounds of grey and brown began to blend into one another as the hours wore on, dust causing the men to gag, weariness and uneven ground leading to stumbles and falls, each one rewarded with a jab from an officer's vine staff and a lash from his tongue. Along the line, men reached surreptitiously for their water packs, taking mouthfuls of the precious liquid to stave off the parching dryness of the journey.